Welcome, everybody. My name is Charlene Margot, and I am the co-founder of the Parent Venture, the nonprofit organization that brings to you the Parent Education Series, an inclusive, high-quality parent education program in the Sequoia Union High School District and other districts within the San Mateo County Office of Education territory. We are very glad to have this important event tonight, the Community Resiliency Model Training Part 2. This special mental health and resiliency training is sponsored by the San Mateo County Office of Education and the Sequoia Union High School District in partnership with this organization, the Parent Venture. Again, we are very grateful for their sponsorship to bring you this important training. This is actually our second round of doing it with the Parent Education Series. We are especially grateful to tonight's trainers, Bradley Ostrander and Shana Karashima. I'll be telling you a little bit more about them in a minute. But just quickly, format-wise tonight, this is going to be a webinar format rather than, a meeting format rather than a webinar. So at the bottom of your Zoom screen, I know most of you are used to this by now, you have the chat button. So please put any comments for one another or us panelists in the chat. My partner, Bev Hartman, will be putting resource links in there as well. And if you have questions along the way, please put them also in the chat. So again, resources, comments to us, the panelists, and any questions that you might have in the chat button. We expect tonight's presentation to be about 60 minutes. At the very end, we'll be doing a short breakout session, so please do stay with us to the end. That will be very worth it. Let's see, what else? This event is being video recorded tonight, so if you have partners or spouses or others that you would like to watch, it will be available soon on our free video library, which has become a trusted resource for the community with more than 26,000 views. All right, let me tell you a little bit about tonight's presenter. Shana Karashima is coordinator of the multi-tiered systems of support for the Sequoia Union High School District. Prior to this position, she was a program specialist for special education in the Redwood City School District. She has dedicated her career in education to support and providing a positive influence for individuals with disabilities. Shana is passionate about program implementation that integrates inclusion, multi-tiered intervention systems, and restorative social, emotional, and behavioral practices. Thank you, Shana, for being with us tonight. Bradley Ostrander is a certified Community Resiliency Model trainer. He previously taught high school math and computer science before accepting a position with the San Mateo County Office of Education as the school climate coordinator. In this role, he supports school and district efforts to provide social, emotional well-being and mental health. In addition to his school climate-related work, this year, Bradley is also serving as an assistant principal for San Mateo County Office of Education's Community School. Welcome, Shana and Bradley. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say. Take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Charlene, for that lovely introduction. So I'm going to get us going, making sure that you guys are able to see my screen okay. Try that again. Just a thumbs up if you're able to see the screen okay. Cool, thank you. And like Charlene said, please, I would love to invite you guys to feel comfortable to either turn on your camera or pop in any participation ideas, thoughts, comments, questions in the chat. We definitely want this to be a very experiential type of Part 2 training on the Community Resiliency Model. And would love for folks to feel comfortable to share out as we as well. So let me jump right into it. This is a Part 2. So we'll review a little bit from our Part 1 training from a few weeks ago. The Community Resiliency Model, CRM for short, you'll hear us say quite a bit. Was founded by Elaine Miller-Karras from the Trauma Resource Institute, who's one of also the co-founders of the Trauma Resource Institute. And so definitely want to give her the credit for all of this wonderful work and such a great model for resiliency. Reminder of our resiliency definition, our operational definition as we're going through the training. So resiliency, as coined by Elaine herself, is an individual and a community's ability to identify and use both individual and collective strengths in living fully with compassion in the present moment and to thrive while managing the activities of our daily lives. In the blue, you'll see here our agenda for this evening. We're going to review again that resiliency zone, a refresher from part 1. And we'll go into a little bit more about CRM and the brain, and then jump back into our CRM tools, continue where we left off, and then a little bit of self-care for us. All right, so the resiliency zone, this is our okay zone. Whenever we're looking at, just regular daily life, we as human beings can ebb and flow kind of throughout our resiliency zone throughout each day as we react and our body response to situations, life events. It's one of the goals for our using our CRM tools is really to widen out that resiliency zone, widening out feeling okay as kind of life comes at us. So things happen regularly in our everyday lives, and our thoughts, our ideas, our emotions, our reactions can kind of move around in that resiliency zone. So sometimes we can feel excited, but still feel okay. Sometimes we can feel sad about something and still feel okay. So you see just kind of some typical emotions that folks can experience. And, as you're experiencing that, you can still stay within that resiliency zone. That is kind of our goal. We reviewed at the last training, part 1 as well, that sometimes, life happens and it can shoot us outside of our resiliency zone, our okay zone. So sometimes we can get stuck above that okay zone. In the box, you'll see those are some experiences when you're stuck high or stuck above your okay zone, feeling edgy, irritable. I experience most often when I get shot out of feeling okay, shot out of my zone, I'm feeling anxious, feeling sometimes panic, sometimes feeling some physical pain, some, express, irritability. Anger can be expressed within that above your okay zone. Sometimes also, and this is not an exhaustive list, right? But sometimes also we can get shot below our okay zone. That's kind of where stuck in the low zone. You can have feelings of isolation, sadness, depression, withdrawal from people, peers, family, exhaustion. Sometimes folks share that they experience a sense of numbness where they just feel, consistently low. So, regular everyday life events, but also trauma and stressful events can shoot us out of feeling okay, feeling like our best self. And so our goal with CRM is to really widen our resiliency zone by the use of some of these, simple resiliency wellness skills that we practiced for last time, and we're going to expand our knowledge of some additional skills this evening. And just by the use of those, that helps us to stay okay, staying feeling our best selves, despite small stressors that can sometimes bump us out of our resiliency zone. All right. Bradley?
Wonderful. Yeah, let's talk about memory a little bit. Just as a reminder, the Community Resiliency Model, or CRM, is very much, it likes to emphasize the notion that our biology is just the way our bodies work. And whenever we experience stress or trauma, we're simply going through a biological response. It's not a sense of weakness, or there's not like something we have to combat against. It's simply our body doing what our body is supposed to be doing. And our hope is if we can help you understand that a little bit, then it can de-emphasize some of the barriers or struggles or hesitancies that folks have when they think about any traumatic experiences they've had or any toxic stress they're going through, that if we understand and recognize the biological response of our bodies, and that's just a very human response, it helps us understand why these skills of the community resiliency model are helpful and valuable, and for some folks can help us be more willing to engage with them a little bit. So we're going to talk about memory for just a little bit. And so to introduce a little bit, we actually have two different types of memory. We have explicit memory and implicit memory. Explicit memory is memory, as you can see on the screen, of information that we consciously work to remember. So anything, if you were to think of the happiest day of your life and what you did that day, that would be accessing your explicit memory. You're imagining and thinking back where you were, what you were wearing, what you did that day, for example, right? That's all part of your explicit memory. We also have our implicit memory, which is oftentimes very unconscious. Our implicit memory would be, for example, the classic analogy of learning to ride a bike, right? They say that once you know how to ride a bike, you can go 20 years and then you can hop on a bike and your body will just naturally remember how to ride that bike. You'll remember how to balance, you'll remember how the pedal shifts, you'll remember how the handlebars work and how to steer. So that's where implicit memory comes into play. It's information that's remembered unconsciously and effortlessly that we just pick up through our lives, through our experiences. But we don't necessarily have to actively remember how to do those things, right? Driving a car is another example. We just are at the point, if we're active and avid drivers on a daily basis, we just naturally know how to do it and we no longer are thinking about what we're doing. We just have those implicit memory skills where we can, we know what our bodies just kind of take over and that muscle memory kicks in. So when we're talking about explicit memories and implicit memories, we want to talk about the hippocampus a little bit. The hippocampus is a part of our brain that processes explicit memory in our cortex. So our hippocampus is in charge of storing memories in their proper perspective and place in our life timeline, right? Our hippocampus is in charge of going, okay, this memory happened when I was 10, and then a couple of years later, this event happened, and it helps us chronologically place those memories within our brain and keep track of all of that information. That's kind of the hippocampus's job, right? Then, and similarly, the amygdala is nearby, and the amygdala can become activated in times of stress or in times of trauma. And the problem, so to speak, or the challenge is that when our amygdala becomes highly stimulated, it releases stress hormones which can interfere with the way that our hippocampus does what it does, right? So sometimes in traumatic experiences or in toxic stress, all of those stress hormones can interrupt the way our hippocampus is working, and it can result in some experiences not being explicitly remembered or remembered in fragments, or it can actually associate what we may say as like strange connections related to those experiences and events, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. Right, so when we think about in those implicit memories, a lot of times implicit memories are associated with sensations in our bodies. It can often be associated with smells, it can be associated with sounds, implicit memories can be associated with kind of our body, right? In terms of like, if we go back to the bicycle metaphor, right? The stance of sitting on a bicycle, the way our arms and shoulders are positioned, the way we balance ourselves, right? There's a lot of just physical muscle memory associated with implicit memories. And so oftentimes implicit memories don't have a sense of time or self, right? It's just kind of, we don't even think about it. So we don't have that active association with a specific time or place. And when implicit memories are subconsciously associated with traumatic events, they oftentimes can be triggered out of the blue without even realizing that they're happening. For example, I was reading about folks who have panic attacks, sometimes when they're doing exercise, right? A very normal thing that most of us attempt to do. The notion of an accelerated heartbeat and sweating will sometimes trigger an implicit memory associated with a panic attack, because that sweat and that elevated heart rate is also part of that panic attack, right? So sometimes just a normal everyday thing that has an increased heart rate and increases perspiration can subconsciously, without us even realizing it, trigger this implicit memory response that our brain has associated with that panic attack, which can unfortunately kind of re-trigger that panic attack to happen. So that is something that can happen. Oftentimes, folks who experience PTSD, it's oftentimes implicit memories that will activate their physiological responses or bump them out of their resilience zone as a result of these implicit memories.
And then Brad, we have a comment. Cherry, I'll never forget this detective at a training describing how trauma interferes with the hippocampus in memory. Recalling what happens from a traumatic event is like throwing a thousand piece puzzle in the air and it falling on the floor and trying to put it back together without the picture on the box. Great example.
Yeah, great analogy. And definitely, and as we said, there could be a lot of implicit memory connections that are being made during that trauma that we don't even realize are happening, while those puzzle pieces are falling. Some could connect and link without us even realizing until, a nonchalant event happens later down the line that we might have not even associated. So this slide is kind of talking about, memory and these things. I forget who the researcher, his name's Scar or Scare. I think you can kind of see there at the bottom of the slide. But he coined these terms of memory capsules, right? Especially when talking about implicit memory. And there can be, these memory capsules are ones where when we sense something, right? Again, it could be a smell, it could be a sound, it could be, physical touch. We can sometimes pop, so to speak, quote unquote, pop what he calls a memory capsule, which can activate some explicit memories and or just some body sensations associated with prior experience. And we can have both pleasant memory capsules and we can have some unpleasant memory capsules, right? An example of a pleasant memory capsule might be, like me, for example, a friend of mine all through high school wore the same perfume all through high school, right? I think I remember it was called like Cool Water for Women. And so now, even to this day, if I'm just walking down the street and someone passes me and they happen to be wearing that same perfume, immediately when I smell that scent, my friend will pop into my mind and some of the fun memories that we had simply based on the smell of her perfume. And it's oftentimes a very pleasant sensation because we've had a lot of good times, there are a lot of good memories, she's a good friend of mine. So just the scent of her perfume, even if I haven't seen her in a long time or she is nowhere around, I will immediately think of her and think of those memories that we had, right? So that would be an example of like a pleasant memory capsule that's being popped by that scent of that perfume, right? But as we're talking about in times of trauma or toxic stress, sometimes some of the associations can be made, again, with smells or sounds or sensations that will kind of trigger a lot of unpleasant memories related to those events, right? So for example, if going back to the example of a war veteran suffering from PTSD, just a loud noise, right? If someone's car backfires, that could subconsciously activate a memory capsule and then bring up memories and experiences and physiological responses related to their time at war, just because of, gun sounds or bombs exploding, where just that car backfiring subconsciously activated that memory capsule. Right, so there could be both positive or unpleasant memory sensations, but the skills that are part of the community resiliency model, which last time I believe you talked about resourcing and grounding and things like that, if we can recognize that a memory capsule has been activated, particularly an unpleasant one, we can then immediately go to our use of the CRM skills to help us navigate, to re-regulate, to bring us back to the present moment so that we aren't pulled off into those unpleasant memories associated that we may not have been expecting in that moment.
We have a couple more comments, Bradley. So Cherry and Shirley, hi Shirley, shared a couple different books. So Cherry shared The Body Keeps the Score. It's a great book. I agree. And Shirley shared My Grandmother's Hands by Resma. Menachem, another great resource. We're talking about trauma, especially racialized trauma. And I was laughing because, hi, Shirley, see you in the chat. So definitely appreciate those resources. And I love, when we're in a group like this and we can share out together. It's always nice to see what other folks are reading. And it's weirdly awesome how things can connect with what we're talking about as well. And we're going to jump into some of the skills, but it was just listening to Bradley reminded me of my own personal example of a memory capsule, and kind of the skill of tracking kind of combined together. So one of, a barbecue, right? So going to a barbecue makes you think of like having a great time, right? Friends, eating good food, having a party with people you may or may not have seen, all pre-pandemic, obviously. But, that can be a feel-good memory capsule. And it used to be for me, having that smell of the barbecue, good times, fun times. But after a traumatic event for me, being evacuated during San Diego wildfires, many years ago now, the smell of burning foliage, everything kind of around me, it's actually mimicked the same kind of smell of a barbecue. And so I found, and I didn't realize this, but I was tracking through learning about CRM, a little bit ago. I was constantly kind of tracking where I'm at in my okay zone, not okay, above or below. And I reacted when I smelled barbecue, and I didn't really understand why. Why was I feeling bad? Why was I feeling anxious? And I like I said earlier, carry my, I shoot above the okay zone. So I carry it in like anxiety, knots in my stomach, feeling, sweaty palms, feeling like my heart racing, with, the smell of barbecue that my husband was just barbecuing. And it's because I was able to connect back to when was the last time that I smelled it, and like, what is that all about? And, I wasn't being re-traumatized. I wasn't, but I was able to understand as I was tracking my senses and what they were picking up, how my body was responding. And it gave me, just kind of opened up a window of insight that I didn't realize I even needed. So I am so grateful to CRM and just understanding these concepts, like Bradley was just talking about these capsules. Understanding these concepts has made a big difference. Is there more in the chat? All right. So next we're going to jump back into some of those skills. And I love how folks are using the chat, so please feel comfortable. I invite you to continue to do so if you feel comfortable. So the last time, like Bradley was saying, we talked about tracking. That's that main, palm of the hand skill, because we're tracking throughout all of our skills that we're learning. We talked about resourcing, and that's, we're building out our resource library together and understanding that kind of concept. And then the skill of grounding, we jumped into that one as well. Tonight, we're going to go into the help now skills. And in my experience, that kids enjoy those help now skills. They're real simple and quick. So we'll jump into those and experience each one of those. Gesturing, and then shift and stay. Are there any questions so far before we jump into skills that folks want to share? Okay, and please feel free, unmute and ask away if they do pop up in your mind. So the help now skills is our tool 4. You can see cool little graphic here, and you'll get a copy of these slides again. The graphic gives a clear picture of the 10 different help now skills. We're going to jump into each one. So what is help now? So these skills can be used for self-care when we're stuck above our okay zone or below our okay zone, our resilient zone. We can teach them to other folks. We learned last time, the mirroring and the modeling neurons. We can, do these things for ourselves and model for folks around us. They mirror kind of what they see. So even within my own family, practicing some of these, my son mirrors what he sees when I'm practicing them. So they can be taught, and we can practice with others to get back into our resilient zone if we get stuck above or below our okay zone. And remember, it's not a crim skill unless we're tracking. So tracking, again, just a reminder, it's connecting with and keeping track of our senses. And remember, we have 6 senses. So what we see, our sight, our smell, our taste, our hearing, our touch, and then our spirit. So just kind of a reminder of that as we're tracking what our body is sensing with all of the different senses that we have. Okay, so our first cool little help now skill. If you have any drink around you, if you have a glass of water or juice or coffee, go ahead and take a sip. What do you notice on the inside as you take that sip? If you're not sure, go ahead and try again and track your senses the whole way down.
This can easily be an interactive portion, so feel free to share in the chat or come off mute if there are any tracking sensations you are noticing.
I noticed cool going down my throat. Cold for Alexandra. Tasted good, refreshing. Coffee, cold coffee, bitter. And so as you're taking stock kind of your senses, as you're drinking a glass of water, Alexandra notices humidity. Sherry, I noticed, I needed that. You're focusing in on just the process of drinking that glass of water or that coffee and the senses and what it's picking up. As you're focused in on those senses, maybe if you had, 100 emails in the queue, that was maybe not in your mind, right? We were focusing in on our senses and what we were picking up. I noticed as I practice crim and tracking that there's certain temperatures of liquids that I drink that I prefer. Different times of day, different biological needs, right? So if I have a warm cup of coffee, that is soothing for me. If I have a cold cup of coffee and I want it to be warm, that is not soothing for me. So just picking up on different senses and what you need. Sherry needed that, so that was great. All right. Next one, so you can see here, if you are outside, please feel free to do so. If you're inside and you can take a look at this picture, just imagine the touch that this person is connecting with the trees. So if you're outside, touch a surface or something in nature, or your environment could be anything natural, so grass, tree, water, sand, and see what you notice. What do you notice this person maybe experiencing to the touch? And I just picked one sense. You could pick up any other. What do you think they might be sensing? Soft, the wetness of the soil. I look at that, I imagine it might be soft as well, like maybe the mossy part of the bark, rough bark. Maybe. And as you are, just guessing kind of what this person's experience is, if you have any other materials in your environment, hopefully not any other materials in your environment. I have my rock that my son gave me, and I use it during crim because I really love the texture of this natural element, the rock, and I noticed a difference between this AirPod case, even though it's hard and smooth, just like the rock is. This is a different sensory experience, the rock itself. So just see what comes up. Bev notices coolness and damp. Have you ever gone to the beach, for example, and maybe picked up the sand and noticed the sand as it trickles through your fingers? Have you ever gone, let's stay with the ocean, go to where the surf's coming in and either notice the sounds or the wetness of the water in the ocean? Right here is a tree. Have you ever taken your shoes and socks off and stuck your feet in the grass? What are the senses that your body is experiencing as that occurs? All right. Okay, the next one. If you could take a look around the space that you're in for this training purpose, here's a picture. So if you can take a look, then pay attention to anything that catches your attention. I'm going to pause there because I saw Cherry jump in. The beach is my all-time favorite place to be. I love how the sand feels in my feet and how the ocean smells. Cherry, you're a pro. You're already picking up on multiple senses in that experience. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so if folks could look around or look at the picture here in the space and see what catches your attention. Go ahead and type it in the chat if you feel comfortable. What catches your eye? I noticed the colors on the wall in that chart. Shirley notices bright colors. Folks at a previous training noticed the window, and I hadn't noticed that in this picture, and noticed the outside bushes or trees that they saw. Symmetry of the chairs and tables. Oh, symmetry is nice. Bev notices the light is coming through the window. Shirley notices the cleanliness of the floors. Shirley must have been a teacher. Dark dots on the wood. Yeah. One of the folks in my training before noticed the little chairs, because it looks like, maybe a preschool kind of class. And noticed the little chairs, and it reminded them of their kid when their kid was in preschool, and that just connected the sensory experience of sight with a memory capsule for them that was pleasant. Cherry, I'm a teacher. I know little people below the bulletin board. Children chattering. Yep, white flag. I saw the little chairs for 10 years. Or I sat on the little chairs for 10 years as a preschool teacher. And if you could notice, the senses that may feel pleasant in your body as you're, either tapping into that memory capsule or just noticing things in the classroom that, feel good, feel pleasant. Sherry teaches kindergarten. Shirley says, I notice how strange it is to not see things spaced apart these days due to COVID. And Shirley, you're already advancing us to one of the upcoming skills, but sometimes, you can be in a sensory experience or a resource, like we were talking about in our resource library, and it shifts to maybe an unpleasant memory. And we'll talk about what we can do during those times. Great, thank you so much for sharing.
Right, here's another example of, again, these are called the help now strategies. And hopefully you're starting to notice a trend as you've been experiencing the couple examples we've done so far, that the help now strategies are literally that. They are to help now, immediately, right? So and what I love about CRIM is that it's great for us as individuals, right? We can use these skills, but we can also utilize these and teach these to others. So the help now are great when I am recognizing that I'm bumped out of my resilient zone. I may not be in a space yet where I can engage in a grounding exercise just because I'm not there. I'm activated and elevated and bumped out of my zone. So the help now strategies are great because they kind of bring me back to the present moment. They bring my senses back to the present time and space, right? Particularly if a memory capsule was activated and maybe a unpleasant memory capsule. And some people, when that happens, may withdraw internally, or they may disassociate, or they may zone out, right? The help now strategies can actively bring us back into our bodies, bring us back into the present moment, and begin that re-regulation process that we can then follow up with additional skills like resourcing or grounding, or actively talking about the tracking that we're doing with the sensations in our bodies. So we'll have a couple more examples for you, but hopefully you're noticing this trend that the goal of these, again, is to help immediately and to bring us back into the moment. And these are really easy to utilize with our students if we're educators, or with our children if we're parents, right? If we recognize that they are bumped out of their zone, you can pick and choose whatever works best for that individual, right? If you know your child is really into colors, this one might be a great example where if you notice they're bumped out of their resilient zone, just asking them, hey, help me point out 6 colors around us right now. And that can distract them a little bit, but then also as they're doing that, they'll naturally begin to re-regulate their nervous system and come back to the present moment. So naming 6 colors that you see in the space that you're in is another great strategy. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide, please. Additionally, we can also, if someone's into numbers or is a very analytical mind, we can focus on counting, right? One of the help now strategies is let's count backwards from 20. And you can also combine that with taking steps and counting our steps or walking around the room, right? Physical movement with counting backwards from 20, again, brings us back into our bodies, into the present moment, begins that re-regulation process. And then we could incorporate more skills as needed. So counting backwards from 20, walking around the room, another great help now strategy.
And Cherry jumped in and shared that she loves this. Reminds me of, think of 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, and 1 you can touch.
For sure. Essentially that's utilizing these help now strategies kind of in a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 format. So that's awesome. Thanks, Cherry. Another example, again, with that physical movement is go for a walk, but be really intentional, thinking about the movement of your arms and legs and really noticing the sensations associated with your feet making contact with the ground or the feeling of the air on your skin, right? Again, it's all about coming back to that present moment. Tracking those sensations within our body is going to naturally help train our bodies to re-regulate in those times that we are bumped out of our resilient zone or we're feeling stress.
Thank you, Cherry. Also, she corrected the last one. 1 thing you can taste.
Yes. All right. And one of, is this the last one? We're getting close. Oh, there's a couple more after this one. Okay. But another one that is good for some people. Again, the great thing about these help now strategies is there's 10 different ones and you can learn which ones work well for you or your students or your children. You can help them learn which ones work well for them. So they have kind of that go-to, right? Because it's every single person's different. So it's not try all or you must try this one. It's all about learning each individual for ourselves, what works and what doesn't. So another example would be pushing your hands against a solid surface, whether that be a wall or a door, and really being intentional with noticing your muscles and the muscle tension and the exertion that you're placing against that wall. An alternative method could be pressing your back against the hard surface, or maybe doing a squat, as you can see in the picture. One thing we really want to emphasize, particularly with doing what works best for you, working in education, I've definitely learned that for some students, kind of putting both hands against a wall and pressing could actually trigger an unpleasant memory capsule for them, right? If they are a teenager, for example, who has had run-ins with the law, they may have had, a police officer or law enforcement interact with them, force them to put their hands on a wall or on a car or whatnot. So keeping in mind that if that is unpleasant for the person, try a different help now strategy, or that's why potentially pressing their back against a wall might be more the action that works for them, because it's not associated with that traumatic event for that person, right? So just something to keep in mind, particularly with this one, because, hands on the wall can be a very common pose that folks can be in that can be associated with traumatic experiences.
Okay, and if you guys want to practice, why don't we try to get up, because I think it'd be a good time anyway. And we'll practice this activity. So if you could get to a space, I'm going to do it myself because I need to, and go against the wall, whatever suits you best. And then lean against the wall, whichever way, again, suits you best. And then do a little squat, if that is what you prefer, or push against the wall, if that's what you prefer. And notice your muscles activating as you do so. We'll do this for just about 10 seconds or so.
As I'm pressing on my desk in front of me, I can feel, if I tense my muscles and press, as soon as I release, I can actually feel some release of tension and some relaxation in my muscles, which is a fairly pleasant sensation for me.
And I went away from the camera and went against the wall and kind of sat down, but pushed against the wall like this picture here. And I noticed my quads activating. I clearly have been sitting for way too long because it felt like brand new to notice these muscles activating that haven't in a little while. Did anybody else notice any sensory experience, muscles, breathing, anything that you noticed? Just that shift over to a different location. Early notice some tension in her legs leaving, simply by getting up and moving. You notice kind of before and after, as muscles activate and go back to relaxed. And like Bradley said, these are very simple skills. And we talked about our part 1 training that, the cortex is not activating as its best self. Our thinking, our speech, our communication is not fully there when our survival brain is activated, our limbic system is activated. And so when we're able to, pick up a tool like this, that's very simple, it's right in front of you, easy to access, you're, again, activating a different part of your sensory system. Thank you, Deb, aligning your posture. Okay, we're gonna try another one. So if you're inside, notice the furniture, touch a surface that you have maybe nearby. You can see different textures on the screen. And notice if it is hard, soft, rough, cool, or warm, or any other descriptor. Notice what you're touching. I can notice on the screen itself certain textures that are definitely aversive to me. And I prefer kind of the smooth, like I have my eyeglasses I don't know, those fabrics that you clean your glasses with. And I like the texture. It's just smooth, silky, it can bend. Notice any kind of textures that really the purposes are soothing to you. Charlene, as a designer, I've loved textures and fabrics and wall surfaces like plaster. Ah, fascinating. I get that. And this is all, this is why the definition of resiliency for this model, it can be individual and, as we relate in our community, because, I may not like that texture, but I really dig this one. And so whatever connects with me and helps me to feel soothed is really what I'm looking for. Terry, I love the strategies. I know already which one works well with each of my children. It's 1:45 a.m. in my time zone, so I don't thank you for the valuable information. Say good night. Good night, Terry, and we will share out the slides so you can have the rest of it.
Thank you for joining us so late, Terry. Have a good night.
I know. Thank you. Okay, this next one is temperature. So if you could notice the temperature of the space that you're in. Is it cold? Is it warm? Is it hot? Just right? What is your just right? My husband loves everything cold in our house, and I love everything warm. So it's a constant comedy of opening and closing windows. In one of my training groups for CRM, I had a partner that would always bring a blanket and wrap it around her shoulders. And, I asked her, what does she get out of that? And she shared that the warmth comforted her. And the same definitely wouldn't go for my husband. That would create tons of anxiety for him. But that's what I mean, really connecting with what connects with you and what is soothing to you. And then the next one is noticing the sounds within the space that you're in. So I'm going to mute myself, and if folks can just notice where they are and the sounds that they hear. And if you wouldn't mind throwing some of the sounds that you heard in the chat. Sherry, I literally was thinking the same thing. My husband loves cold and I love warm. Like our house, we battle every day over the AC heat. Been doing it for 20 years. Sound, I'm not in a great place for sound, but I did notice, the air conditioner, the sound of quiet. What else did folks hear? I hear a cat scratching at the door, soft hum of the AC, far away sound of traffic, electric fan, hum of the computer. Yeah, peaceful, quiet. Oh, that's nice. I crave the quiet peace of a home. Sometimes a little active. Sherry, I hear my husband watching Family Feud in the living room. Great. A small plane. Yeah, and sound can be pretty powerful. All of our senses are very powerful. And connecting with the one that really jives with your body and how your body reads the world is great. Music is a big piece of me. I'm a singer, and so not like a fancy singer, but I love to sing, and I always have, and that can take me to a completely different space if I'm singing or listening to music that connects with me, and that's just one example of sound. Charlene, they use this activity in teaching mindfulness to kids and to reduce anxiety. All right, so those are all of our help now skills. And I know I showed, thank you, Mihoko. I hear my sons playing together. Oh, The graphic that I shared at the beginning of that section that we went over, it has all of the different help now skills in just kind of pictorial format. And so I think that can kind of be helpful. So you could just print that out from the slide deck that we share out and post that up if, you know, just forget really what were all those that we covered, and you see one and you do it, and it can change things. So, all right, the next tool is gesturing.
Indeed. The next tool is tool 5, gesturing. Research has actually shown that every culture across the world utilizes physical gestures of some sort to communicate information, to express attitude. Every culture utilizes gestures, and there's a lot of different meaning in gestures, right? There can be gestures related to our faith. There can be gestures related to strength and power. There can be gestures really to communicate anything. And gesturing is one of the CRM tools that can be really useful, both for us, again, for ourselves or for others that were our children or students that we may be working with. Oftentimes gestures are right underneath our conscious awareness. We often gesture without realizing the gesture we're making. Or you may be having a conversation with someone and you may notice some gestures they are making. And sometimes bringing attention to those gestures, either noticing them within ourselves or pointing them out to someone and say, hey, I noticed that you are fiddling with your wedding ring, for example, or that ring on your finger, and I see you twirling it around. Does that bring about pleasant sensations for you? And maybe just oftentimes bringing attention to that gesture can, again, bringing it back to tracking, right? Associating that gesture with the sensations we feel, right? We're continually tracking within our bodies, but particularly if they're self-soothing or calming gestures, those gestures in and of themselves can help us re-regulate, right? All of these CRM skills are about re-regulating our nervous systems when we are feeling bumped out of our resilient zone. And thinking back to, you probably covered this in session 1, but neurons and neural connections within our brains and neural plasticity, right? If we intentionally associate a specific gesture with pleasant sensations that we notice that we are experiencing, we can create new neural pathways within our brain so that the more we utilize that soothing gesture, the easier or faster it will help us to re-regulate our bodies when we are feeling activated or bumped out of our zone. So as we practice gestures that may be self-soothing, again, it's always about focusing on what's happening on the inside. For me, for example, I have a very explicit memory of my mom tucking me into bed when I was little, and she would run her fingers through my hair. And so even to this day, and that would help me fall asleep. And so even to this day, one of my self-soothing gestures when I'm feeling stressed is I will kind of rub my own head. Unfortunately, I don't have much hair anymore, but it actually is nice if you ever touch someone who has a buzz cut head like mine. It's actually kind of a nice sensation. But for me, just rubbing my hand across my head is a self-soothing gesture that can help me, particularly when I focus on, right now, my head feels very warm, even though my palm is cool. So there's this interesting, dichotomy there of temperature sensations. And then of course I can feel the little tiny hairs that I do have on my head as I rub my hand across my head. And so that is a self-soothing gesture for myself that when I'm feeling dysregulated can help me work through that a little bit. Again, as I'm practicing tracking and noticing those sensations, I may begin to notice that my breathing rate slows down or that my heart rate begins to normalize while I'm doing this self-soothing gesture. So gesturing is a great strategy to help us. Again, we may notice it in others, right? So simply calling attention to it and helping folks make that association of, oh, I didn't notice that I was performing that gesture while I was re-regulating. And if we bring some explicit attention to that, again, we can help make some new neural connections where that gesture can strengthen over time and helping us re-regulate our nervous systems. So if you like, oh, sorry, go ahead, Shana. Were you going to say something?
I was just going to comment because I'm connecting with what you're saying. I I noticed after learning CRM and really understanding it's really, tracking and connecting with your senses, some of these things may already exist for you, right? So Bradley's talking about rubbing his head, that happened when he was little, right? Or that started, right? I noticed I massage like my hands because I've got carpal tunnel. So it was just a natural thing, but then it turned into a soothing thing. I think the trick with CRM, which is so nice, is that you're just kind of connecting it back to being able to connect what you already do to your sensory system and relating it to whether or not you're feeling okay, kind of pre and post gesture or pre and post help now skill, or that kind of thing. Noticing those shifts and that change was what I kind of understood after practicing CRM.
All right, wonderful. So gesturing is fairly simple and straightforward. So we're actually moving on to our sixth and final tool in our CRM toolkit. And this final tool is called Shift and Stay. And shift and stay literally means, as you can see on your screen, shifting your attention away from sensations that in your body that are unpleasant to sensations that are neutral or pleasant and staying there, right? And always, this is a choice. You always have the ability to choose whether you would like to shift away from unpleasant sensations. But as we talked about with neuroplasticity and connecting those memories, right? If we can connect to pleasant sensations in our body, then those can strengthen over time and can help us re-regulate. And shift and stay is actually the last of the skills because it kind of encompasses and incorporates all the other ones we've talked about, right? And whenever you're shifting, you're also tracking. Maybe you're utilizing a resource and you're strengthening and intensifying that resource in relation to sensations within your body. So you've shifted to a more pleasant sensation so that you can associate talking about or thinking about your resource with that more pleasant sensation, right? So it's all about shifting away from the unpleasant to pleasant or even neutral if you're not necessarily experiencing anything particularly pleasant in that moment. So using shift and stay is a great thing to do if you feel like you're bumped out of your resilient zone. And so kind of as we talked about, shifting your attention to a place inside that feels neutral or more reasonable. And again, incorporating all of those other skills associated with the community resiliency model. So thinking about, talking about, picking up and feeling a resource you may have, engaging in a grounding exercise to bring your attention to the present moment, right? You're tracking and you're actively attempting to shift your attention away from unpleasant to pleasant or neutral. You could be utilizing a gesture while doing this. And so again, it kind of incorporates, if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide, it incorporates all of the other skills that we've learned. Well, it's all about that tracking and associating and making those explicit associations that we have in our bodies and making them connections with all of the different skills we've talked about, right? Resourcing, grounding, those help now strategies, and focusing on pleasant versus unpleasant sensations.
All right, so this was going to be a breakout, but I think we're a small enough group. If you want to just take a look at these kind of ponder questions, kind of to yourself, if you could, because I know it's late, and so I want to be mindful of folks' time and appreciate you guys being here. So what CRM skill connects with you most? Folks were sharing that in the chat, so it's great that you're already kind of thinking about what connects with me the best. Throughout your day, what times could you see using them and that being helpful? And then paying it forward. Who in your life would you want to be able to know more about CRM? And this is, good for us to know kind of as, we support our district, which means our students, their families. And so if you're thinking, my kid in that whole class would be great, or my uncle or my brother-in-law or something like that, it's just kind of good to think about. And then there is an app. So I found this really, really helpful for me. when I was first learning CRM, because you're able to pop into those skills. Like I needed language for myself to practice. And so you can pop into those skills. They'll take you to a script that is read. The audio is by Elaine herself, and she's got a very soothing voice. And so it's kind of nice to kind of hear that. You can see at the bottom, it's very simple, start and stop. If you want to pause, if you want to rewind, very easy. It's a free app. I should mention that. The help now skills are at the top because those are, the simplest. It's 10 skills. You can pop into them real quick. Like I was saying earlier, when, you're overstressed, your thinking brain is not, the strongest. It's really hard to kind of process everything. Jumping straight to a help now skill is a great tool to get yourself to that okay zone, that resiliency zone. And so there's some resiliency images at the bottom part of that app, which I found helpful, practicing this with kids, my own kid, practicing it, just understanding conceptually, like I'm trying to say, okay, I'm trying, if I'm bumping out and I don't have the words to say it, I can just point above that line. So that's cool. And then I wanted to share with you just kind of CRM is awesome and it's been all around the world. And, we shared with the part one for sure, doesn't matter what reading level or literacy level, or it doesn't matter, what culture somebody comes from. As we see, it's really about connecting with our senses and what connects best, what skill connects best with us. Very, individual. And so nobody can tell you, oh, that doesn't connect with you. We know what connects with us. So I've really appreciated kind of the judgment being removed a little bit from my body experiencing the world. And so I love to pay that forward with folks. And then there's a little survey if you would feel comfortable. I will put that link in the chat itself. Are there any questions that, oh, sorry, let me stop sharing. Questions that folks may have? That this would be a great time because we're a little bit early. And if not, that's fine. Oh, sorry, there's some more things in the chat.
Shana, do you want to put that slide back up that had the survey? I think it's a live link.
Yes. I will go
Or
back
maybe everybody got it in the chat.
I just put in the chat so you can see it there too, but I will go back to the slide deck. Okay, and then there's my email. If you have any questions or, with that supposed to be breakout activity, one of the questions was who else would you want to kind of know a little bit more about CRM? You could definitely email me if you have thoughts on that or questions about any of this. I put Brad's in there, so you can also check in with them.
Shana and Brad, there's a good question here from Shirley wanting to know if the CRM strategies have been shared widely with students and youth in the county. And Bradley, maybe you could tell us, is this something you're using with students at the community school, for example?
It is, yeah. At the school where I'm an assistant principal, we haven't gotten to the point yet where we're explicitly teaching these skills to the students, but we have done trainings with our staff. So they are well aware of, so I see them oftentimes utilizing the help now strategies, sometimes without the students even recognizing it. And it seems to be working quite well. And I will say at the San Mateo County Office of Education, we have been quite busy over the past year. We've done a lot of trainings. We've trained a lot of teachers and educators across the county on these CRM strategies. We've done a lot of district-wide professional developments. The question, I'm not sure then if those skills are then being taught to those students, right? But I know that from the work that we're doing at the county office, we have trained a lot of people, and we actually had a grant this year where we were able to certify a bunch of trainers. So I would say across the county, there's a good almost 30 certified CRM trainers now. So there's a lot of folks out there helping spread the word of the community resiliency model and how awesome it is.
That's great. Thank you.
And I can just share kind of what we've been doing in our district. So I've trained about 300 plus staff members in our district. And they have responded, very well with saying, that they're going to take the tools and use it with their students that they work with, which is lovely. We, recently had a tragedy in the district for one of our students and their families, and we're able to have some of our folks that are trained in CRM be able to interact with the students using CRM skills. And our students had more significant disabilities. And, CRM, like I said, really can be used with any level of learning and need. And that was really key in helping our community within the school to stay feeling okay with such an awful thing that happened. And so I definitely, we're working on like an explicit, like Bradley was saying, an explicit student facing training for CRM that we eventually want to get in the hands of all of our teachers that could be doing this with their students in our district. And for our staff, because it's really important that we're taking care of each other as adults in our district, so that, the mirroring is very real, the modeling is very real. And so if we're able to take care of ourselves and respond in turn in the same fashion with our students, it's only going to make better the situation for them. So we're going to be introducing kind of those CRM pauses with our staff on a regular basis, so anybody can come and just reinforce all these skills that we've learned as a community of staff. So.
Yeah, and I agree that focusing on ourselves and our colleagues and our friends and our families is just as important as teaching these skills to our students. We've been definitely seeing that, particularly throughout the pandemic, right? There's a lot of like, focus on your own self-care and take care of yourself. And a lot of us are stressed, and sometimes it's like, don't tell me that, like I'm trying to survive and figure it out, and I'll get to that when I get to that. And these skills being so simple have been really helpful. We've received a lot of feedback that these are one of the most easily accessible things that folks can go to for that, self-regulation, for that self-care, and they tie really well in with a lot of other mindfulness strategies and meditation strategies. So we've been getting a lot of great feedback that these tools are excellent for us as adults as well, and parents and educators, just attempting to get through day by day. So
I love the idea of a CRM pause. I could really see trying to settle a classroom down by having them just listen or find the colors. It's like the card games we used to play when we were little, right? Like I Spy with my beady eye, that kind of thing. Well, thank you, Shana and Bradley. This has really been a great session. I know that everybody with us today, thank you for all your participation and engagement. That was great. And again, this video will be online shortly. And as Shana said, we will follow up with the slides so that you can have them to refer to. Shana and Bradley, any last words for our group today?
Well, I just really appreciate folks being here and so much sharing. And it really, it brings it to life for me. Like, I've done this training a number of times, and I'm always, even if I'm tired, like I'm always excited to do one, because I, selfishly get so much out of it, sharing in the experience that other folks share with us. And just, it's infectious. So if I see, like I got a lot out of Bradley sharing his story with his mom, and how tender and sweet that was. And it took me completely out of all the stress that I was thinking about, what's to do next and all that kind of stuff. So I really appreciate you being here. I know it's hard to, spend time after the work hours and, life and family and so many demands on our time, but I think hopefully you find it as valuable as I did as a parent, learning this, not just a professional, but learning this for the first time and using it in my life. So thank you for being here.
Shana said that pretty perfectly. I don't have much to add other than thank you all so much for joining us this evening. I do see some comments in the chat. Someone said definitely been seeing what you just described in the community where adults are expressing they don't have time for mindfulness. So it's great to have some things that are quick and accessible. And then Shirley said, thanks so much for this helpful and informative session. Thank you, Shirley.
You bet. Well, thank you, everybody. We will also send the link to you to the video library from the Parent Education Series. Lots of great stuff on there, more than 110 videos, including CRM training. So again, thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. Special thanks to you, Shana and Bradley, for the great presentations. Hope to see you all again soon. Good night.